A normal night. Until it wasn't. Ethan Carter sat in his dimly lit room, staring out of the massive glass window that overlooked the alien city below. The sky was a strange shade of violet, dotted with two moons that bathed the city in a soft, eerie glow. Even after months of living here, he still wasn't used to it. Everything about this place was different. The air, the sounds, even the people. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Being the only human on this station made him feel like an outsider. Sure, he was here as a diplomat, but most of the alien inhabitants didn't trust him. They whispered about him in their strange language, their eyes filled with both curiosity and fear. The only one who treated him somewhat normally was Zylara, his assigned maid. She was from the Rylari race. Tall, graceful, with smooth silver-blue skin and large, glowing green eyes. Unlike the others, she didn't avoid him. She spoke to him when necessary, cleaned his quarters, and left without lingering. But there was one rule she never broke. She never entered his room at night. It was a strict tradition among her people. Rylari never intruded on someone's private space after dark. It was considered taboo, a violation of something sacred. Ethan didn't understand it, but he respected it. So when his bedroom door suddenly slid open in the middle of the night, he nearly jumped. His instincts kicked in. He wasn't expecting anyone. He quickly turned, his heart pounding, half expecting an attack. But instead, he saw Zylara standing frozen in the doorway, her wide green eyes locked onto him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. Ethan was shirtless, dressed in just a pair of loose sleeping pants. He hadn't expected visitors, and now Zylara was staring at him like she had seen a ghost. "Zylara," he said cautiously, breaking the silence. She didn't answer. Her entire body was stiff, her breathing shallow. Ethan frowned. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Still, no response. She took a slow, shaky step backward, her face pale, her hands trembling. Ethan was getting worried now. She wasn't just shocked. She was terrified. "What is it?" he asked again, stepping closer. "Did something happen?" This time, she reacted. She stumbled backward so fast that she almost tripped. "You," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stopped. "Me? What?" She swallowed hard, her glowing eyes darting between his bare chest and his face. Then, with a voice full of disbelief, she whispered, "You are not supposed to exist." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "What?" She shook her head, as if trying to convince herself that she was seeing something impossible. Her body was trembling now, her hands clutching the fabric of her uniform. "You can't be," she muttered. "This is forbidden. This is a mistake." Ethan took another step forward, but this time, she flinched. That reaction made his stomach twist. "I don't understand," he said carefully. "What are you talking about? Why are you acting like this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she dropped her gaze to the floor, her entire body tense. Then suddenly, she dropped to her knees. Ethan blinked. "Zylara, what the hell?" "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know until now." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Know what?" Her hands were pressed against the cold metal floor, her head bowed low as if in submission. She was breathing heavily, struggling to speak. I have seen ancient records," she admitted. "Legends, stories, but I never thought they were real." Ethan's patience was running thin. "What stories?" "Zylara, you're not making sense." Finally, she lifted her head, and the look in her eyes made Ethan freeze. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something he couldn't fully understand. She whispered one final thing, something that sent a shiver through his entire body. "You bear the mark of the ancients. You are the destroyer." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He was about to demand an explanation when suddenly, the station alarms blared. A voice echoed through the speakers. Unauthorized presence detected. Security en route. Zilara's eyes widened in sheer panic. She lunged forward, grabbing Ethan's arm. "You have to hide," she hissed. "Now." Ethan hesitated. "Wait, what? Why?" "No time," she whispered desperately. "If they find you like this, they will kill you." His heartbeat thundered in his ears. What the hell was happening? What had she seen? Before he could ask, the heavy footsteps of the station guards echoed from the corridor outside. They were getting closer. Zilara looked at him, pleading. "Please, Ethan. Trust me." For a moment, he considered running, but something inside him told him that this was bigger than just a misunderstanding. Something was very, very wrong. Gritting his teeth, he made his decision. He ran, and as the door hissed shut behind him, only one thought echoed in his mind. What am I? The forbidden sight. Ethan's heart pounded as he ducked into the dimly lit storage compartment adjacent to his room. The cold metal walls pressed against his bare skin as he crouched, listening intently. His breathing was shallow, controlled. Years of instinct told him that whatever was happening right now, it wasn't normal. Outside, the heavy boots of Raylari security forces stomped across the sleek floors. The station's automated warning system continued to blare in the background. Unauthorized presence detected. Security en route. Ethan clenched his jaw. Unauthorized presence. That didn't make sense. This was his room. He was the only human here. Who exactly were they looking for? Then a muffled voice, deep, firm, filled with authority. "Maid Zilara, step forward." Ethan could picture the scene in his head. Zilara, kneeling just as he had left her, her face pale, her hands shaking. But why? What had she seen? Through the narrow ventilation panel in the storage room, he caught glimpses of the guards, tall, armored figures in silver-black plating, their glowing visors scanning the room. 3 of them, armed. One of the guards took a step forward, his tone growing sharper. "Explain yourself." For a moment, silence stretched. Then Zilara spoke, her voice strained. I was delivering a late message. The human was asleep. I left immediately." Ethan's fingers tightened into fists. She was lying. A long pause. Then the head guard spoke again. "You were in his presence at night. That is forbidden. Why did you break the rule?" Zilara hesitated. Ethan held his breath. Then she responded, her voice quiet but firm. "It was a mistake. It will not happen again." A heavy silence followed. Ethan could almost hear the unspoken tension in the room. Then the sound of a boot scraping against the floor. The head guard stepped closer to her. "You are trembling." Ethan's stomach twisted. Zilara swallowed hard. "I am not." The guard exhaled, his patience thinning. "Look at me." A long pause. Then Ethan saw Zilara's shadow shift slightly. She wasn't obeying. Then the guard's voice dropped, becoming deadly quiet. "You saw something." Ethan's blood ran cold. They knew. The silence stretched unbearably. Zilara had seconds to decide. If she told them what she saw, what she believed, Ethan was dead. He clenched his fists. He needed to move. He needed to get out of here. But if he ran now, they would know for sure. Then Zilara did something unexpected. She let out a soft breath and laughed. The sound was light, almost dismissive. "Saw something," she repeated, her voice regaining its usual sharp confidence. "I saw a half-dressed human sitting on his bed." She scoffed. "Honestly, I was more shocked by the mess in his room than anything else." Ethan nearly smirked. She was bluffing. The guard didn't seem convinced. "Your heart is racing. Your hands are unsteady." Zilara exhaled, shaking her head. "It is embarrassing enough to break tradition. I do not need you reminding me." A pause. Then the guard let out a short, dissatisfied grunt. "Very well. We will confirm with the human later. Ethan felt the tension release just slightly. The guards were buying it. For now, go back to your quarters, the lead guard ordered. You are dismissed. Ethan heard their boots shifting, the sounds of them exiting the room. Then, silence. He waited, counted the seconds, listened for movement. Finally, after what felt like forever, the storage room door hissed open. Xylara stood there, her face pale, her breathing uneven. You can come out, she whispered. For now. Ethan stepped out, his muscles still tense. He exhaled. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Ethan crossed his arms. You want to tell me what the hell that was about? Xylara closed her eyes, steadying herself. You wouldn't understand. Ethan scoffed. Try me. She hesitated, looking at him carefully, as if debating whether to say anything at all. Then, slowly, she reached up and pulled something out of her uniform. A small metallic object. A thin disc, no bigger than the palm of her hand. She pressed a hidden switch on the side. Instantly, a hologram flickered to life. Ethan blinked. It was a drawing. A detailed, ancient depiction of a figure standing tall, surrounded by flames. But what made Ethan's breath catch in his throat was the figure itself. It looked exactly like him. The same build, the same short, rough hair, even the scar on his left collarbone. Xylara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. This is over 10,000 years old. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. That's impossible. She shook her head. No, it is not. Ethan's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. He took a step closer, scanning the hologram. Beneath the figure, there were symbols. Strange letters, ancient writing. Ethan glanced at Xylara. What does it say? She hesitated. Then she slowly translated, her voice filled with something between fear and awe. He will return when the stars call for war. A heavy silence followed. Ethan exhaled, running a hand down his face. Right. Fantastic. That's not ominous at all. Xylara didn't smile. Instead, she whispered, You are not supposed to exist, Ethan. But you do. And that means everything is about to change. Ethan locked eyes with her. He could see it now. The fear wasn't just for him. It was for everyone. Because if this prophecy was true, then Ethan wasn't just some human diplomat. He was a walking, breathing warning. And the galaxy would come for him. It was only a matter of time. Secrets within the palace. Ethan paced the room, his mind racing. His heart still hammered from the close call with the guards, but what Xylara had just shown him troubled him more than anything else. A 10,000-year-old prophecy, a figure that looked exactly like him, and the chilling words, He will return when the stars call for war. It was impossible. He wasn't special. He wasn't some ancient warrior reborn. He was just a human, an out-of-place diplomat trying to navigate alien politics. But the fear in Xylara's eyes told him otherwise. She stood near the doorway, gripping the edges of her sleeves tightly, as if holding herself together. Ethan took a deep breath and turned to face her. All right, enough riddles. You need to tell me exactly what's going on. Xylara hesitated. She swallowed hard. I shouldn't even be telling you this. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You already broke one rule tonight. What's another? She didn't smile. Instead, she glanced at the closed door as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, urgent. You aren't human. Ethan frowned. Yeah, I noticed. She shook her head. You don't understand. Humans are not supposed to exist anymore. That made Ethan pause. A cold sensation crept over him. What the hell does that mean? Xylara took a step closer, lowering her voice further. I have spent my life studying restricted history, stolen fragments of knowledge hidden from my people. I've read records that contradict everything the High Council teaches us. ****. Ethan folded his arms. And she exhaled shakily. And, according to those records, humans were wiped out over 10,000 years ago. Ethan's breath hitched. That's impossible. Zylara finished for him. I know, but it is the truth my people refuse to acknowledge. Ethan tried to process what she was saying. So let me get this straight. According to your history, humanity should be extinct. But I'm standing right here, which means, what? That history is wrong. Zylara hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered, or that something has been deliberately erased. Ethan let that sink in. Deliberately erased. That would mean the galaxy had tried to erase humanity's existence. Ethan sat down on the edge of his bed, running a hand over his face. This just keeps getting better. Zylara took a step forward. The High Council hides things, Ethan, not just from my people, but from the entire galactic coalition. There are no official records of what truly happened to your species. But she hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. I have seen fragments, glimpses of what might have happened. Ethan looked up sharply. What do you mean? Zylara swallowed, then pulled something else from her uniform, a small metallic data key. I stole this from a restricted archive 3 years ago. Her fingers trembled as she handed it to him. It contains pieces of lost history. Some of it is corrupted, but the parts that remain. She trailed off, biting her lip. Ethan turned the small device over in his palm. What's on it? She hesitated, then whispered, footage of the war. The room felt colder. Ethan's jaw tightened. The war that supposedly wiped us out. Zylara nodded. Yes, but what's left of the footage doesn't show an extinction. It shows something worse. Ethan exhaled. Worse. She met his eyes, her voice almost shaking. It shows a betrayal. The hidden records. Ethan stared at the data key. His instincts told him this was dangerous. But at this point, he needed to see for himself. He plugged the key into the small holographic projector built into the room's console. The device flickered to life, casting grainy, distorted images into the air. What he saw sent a chill through his bones. A battlefield. No, not just any battlefield. A planet-sized war zone. The footage was old, but the destruction was clear. Massive cities lay in ruin, engulfed in fire and smoke. Skies filled with warships, explosions illuminating the darkness. And then, Ethan's breath caught. Humans. Not diplomats. Not explorers. Warriors. They were armored, carrying weapons unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. They moved with precision, with purpose. They weren't losing this war. They were winning. The footage jumped, glitching for a few moments, before stabilizing again. Now Ethan saw something even more terrifying. A council chamber filled with alien leaders. Zylara's people were among them. The timestamp on the recording suggested that it was before the destruction began. A voice crackled through the corrupted audio. They are too strong. They cannot be reasoned with. Another voice responded, deeper, laced with fear. Then we must erase them before they erase us. Ethan clenched his fists as realization hit him. The galaxy hadn't fought humanity. They had betrayed it. The war wasn't about conquest. It was a massacre, a deliberate attempt to wipe out his species. The footage cut off suddenly, and the room fell into silence. Ethan's breathing was uneven. His mind raced. Zylara watched him carefully. Now you see why they cannot know about you. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he muttered, they didn't erase us because we were losing. They erased us because they were afraid. Zylara nodded. And if they find out a human has survived? Ethan exhaled. They'll try to finish what they started. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the station alarms blared again. But this time, they were different. More urgent. Zylara turned to the door, her face paling. No. Ethan stood up. What? She swallowed hard. They're locking down the station. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? She turned back to him, panic in her eyes. It means they know, Ethan. They know you're here. Escape or embrace destiny. The station alarm screamed through the metal corridors, a cold, mechanical voice announcing over the intercom. Emergency lockdown activated. All personnel remain in designated quarters. Unauthorized biological entity detected. Security teams mobilizing. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms rise. Unauthorized biological entity. They weren't talking about some random intruder. They were talking about him. Xylura's face was pale, her glowing green eyes wide with panic. We have to go. Now. Ethan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. There was no time to think. No time to hesitate. If he stayed here, he'd be dead within the hour. But where could he run? The station was massive, an entire floating city in deep space, controlled by the Galactic Coalition. It wasn't built for fugitives, and he was human. That meant there would be nowhere to hide. The chase begins. Xylura grabbed Ethan's wrist, pulling him towards the back wall. With a quick tap of her fingers, a hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage behind the walls. Ethan blinked. You have secret tunnels. Xylura pushed him inside. Every servant does. It's how we move without disturbing the nobles. They stepped into the dark passage just as the sound of marching boots filled the hallway behind them. Room Buriachish in 3 CQNDS. Prepare to engage. Ethan barely had time to register those words before. Boom. The door to his room exploded inward, sending fire and debris flying. The force shook the walls, nearly throwing Ethan off balance. Xylura yanked him forward. Move. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He ran. The passage twisted and turned, narrow and claustrophobic. Pipes lined the walls, the dim emergency lights barely enough to see. Behind them, the muffled shouts of the security team echoed through the metal. Then, a new voice crackled through the intercom. Human target confirmed. Orders from High Command. Capture alive if possible. Lethal force authorized. Ethan's blood ran cold. They didn't just want to arrest him. They wanted to silence him. Xylura cursed under her breath. They know you saw the records. Ethan clenched his fists. Yeah, no kidding. Reaching the restricted hangar, they finally reached an access ladder. Xylura motioned for Ethan to climb first. He hesitated. Where are we going? She glanced back, her expression grim. A place I shouldn't even know exists. Ethan wasn't reassured, but he didn't argue. He started climbing. The passage led them to a dark chamber with an airtight metal door. Xylura pressed her hand against a biometric scanner. The console blinked red, denying access. She hissed a curse and pulled a small device from her belt, jamming it into the scanner. Sparks flew as the device overrode the system. BEE. Access granted. The door hissed open, revealing the hidden hangar. Ethan's breath caught. Inside was a single spacecraft, small, sleek, built for stealth rather than combat. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. A ship like no other. Xylura sprinted towards the ship, her fingers flying over a control panel on the side. The engines rumbled to life. Ethan stepped closer, eyes narrowing. This is military grade. Xylura didn't look at him. It is beyond military grade. This ship is unregistered, no official record, no tracking beacon. She exhaled. If we get off the station in this, they won't be able to follow. Ethan's eyes widened. Where did you get this? Xylura's lips pressed into a thin line. I stole it. A long time ago. Ethan was about to question her further when a new alarm blared. Hangar Security BRDACGD. Sector 7 Lofki Gideon JGG2. All guards to position. Xylura spun around. They're cutting off our escape. Ethan's muscles tensed. He knew what was coming. A fight. The fight for freedom. The hangar doors burst open. A squad of heavily armed alien soldiers flooding in. Their armor gleamed under the cold white lights, their weapons raised. "Stand down, human." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, that's not happening." He grabbed a metal bar from the side of the ship and hurled it at the nearest soldier. The alien barely had time to react before it slammed into his chest, knocking him backward. Xylera took advantage of the chaos. She sprinted to the ship's external turret controls, flipping a switch. A hidden cannon deployed from the side of the vessel, spinning to life. Boom! A shockwave tore through the hangar as the turret unleashed a powerful pulse blast, knocking several guards off their feet. Ethan rushed forward, tackling another soldier to the ground. He slammed his fist into the alien's helmet, grabbed its dropped weapon, and spun around, firing at the others. The air filled with flashing lights and blaster fire. "ETHN, GETN," Xylera shouted. Ethan didn't hesitate. He sprinted up the ramp and into the ship. Xylera followed, sealing the door behind them. The cockpit lights flared to life as the ship's AI system engaged. "Prepare for immediate-launch." Outside, security teams scrambled, shouting commands. Too late. Xylera slammed a switch forward. The engines roared, and the ship shot forward, tearing through the hangar doors and into the open void of space, breaking free. The moment they escaped, a dozen warning sirens filled the ship. Ethan turned to the screen. His stomach dropped. Oh, great. They're scrambling fighters. Xylera gritted her teeth. Hold on. She twisted the controls, sending the ship into a tight spiral just as plasma bolts streaked past. The enemy fighters were closing in fast. Ethan watched as Xylera's fingers moved with inhuman precision, dodging every incoming shot. "Damn," he muttered. "You're good at this." Xylera smirked, even as she sent the ship into another evasive maneuver. "I told you. I stole this ship. You think I didn't learn how to fly it?" Ethan grinned, right before a missile lock warning flashed on the screen. "Incoming Puro GCTIL." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Xylera." "I see it." She didn't hesitate. She pulled the ship into a steep dive, heading straight toward the nearby asteroid belt. The fighters hesitated. Xylera smirked. "They won't follow us in here." She gunned the engines. The ship vanished into the asteroid field, leaving the station, and the entire galactic coalition far behind. A new path forward. As the ship finally slowed, floating deep within the asteroid belt, Ethan let out a long breath. They had made it. For now. Xylera turned to him, her expression unreadable. "We can't go back. Ever." Ethan nodded. He already knew that. But he wasn't planning on running forever. He looked out into the vast expanse of space, his mind finally clear. They tried to erase humanity, but he was still here. And now, it was time to find out if he was truly the last, or just the first of many. The rise of humanity. The ship drifted silently within the asteroid belt, surrounded by towering chunks of frozen rock and dust, each one the size of a city. The distant glow of the station they had escaped from still flickered on the navigation screen, but it was fading fast. For the first time in what felt like hours, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. They had escaped, but only just. He sat back in the co-pilot's seat, rubbing a hand over his face. His body ached from the chase, his mind still racing. The weight of everything. The revelation. The betrayal. The fact that the galaxy had tried to erase humanity. It pressed down on him like a crushing force. Across from him, Xylera sat at the ship's controls, her hands still gripping the throttle. Her usually calm expression was gone, replaced by something far more complicated. Fear, relief, and something else. Ethan exhaled. "All right, we need a plan." Xylera glanced at him. "You're assuming we have time to make one." Ethan smirked tiredly. We just outran an entire station full of elite soldiers. Give me a few seconds to pretend we're not about to die." Xylera shook her head, but a hint of a smile ghosted across her lips. Then she turned serious. "The Coalition won't stop hunting you, Ethan. Now that they know you exist, they'll track you across the stars." Ethan met her gaze. "Then let's stop running." Xylera blinked. "You can't be serious." Ethan leaned forward. "They want to erase me. That means they think I'm a threat. And maybe I am." Xylera frowned. "What are you saying?" Ethan tapped the navigation console, bringing up the holomap. His eyes locked onto a single coordinate, a set of numbers buried deep within the ship's ancient memory banks. A location so old that it had been wiped from most modern star charts. Xylera noticed what he was looking at and tensed. "No, that's impossible." Ethan smirked. "You said it yourself. History has been erased. That means we need to go looking for the parts they didn't want anyone to find." Xylera's hands curled into fists. "That place is a myth, Ethan." He stared at her. So was I. Silence filled the cockpit. Then, finally, Xylera exhaled. "You're insane." Ethan grinned. "I know." He reached forward and locked in the coordinates. The engines hummed as the ship calculated the jump. A soft beep echoed through the cockpit. "Destination confirmed. Earth. The Lost World." The ship lurched forward, piercing through the fabric of space-time, leaving the asteroid belt behind. For hours, they drifted through the vast emptiness of deep space. The silence felt heavier here, more unnatural. It was as if they were traveling through a graveyard, a place forgotten by time. Ethan sat quietly, watching the stars blur past. He had never given much thought to Earth. To him, it had always been a distant legend, a place humans supposedly came from but had no way of returning to. But now he was going back. Xylera broke the silence. "There's a reason no one goes there, you know." Ethan glanced at her. "Because it's a dead world." She hesitated. Then she shook her head. "Because it's not." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Xylera's hands rested on the control panel. Even though it was erased from history, some rumors remained. Whispers among the older races, stories that never died. Ethan leaned closer. "What stories?" She exhaled. "That something still lives on Earth, something that should have died 10,000 years ago." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "You're saying humanity survived?" Xylera's gaze darkened. "I'm saying if they did, they are not the same as the ones who left." A long silence stretched between them. Then, the ship's eye chimed. Approaching target, exiting hyperspace. The ship shuddered as it slowed, the glow of the stars returning to normal. Ethan turned to the main viewport, and his breath caught in his throat. There it was. Earth. The truth beneath the ruins. The planet floated in the darkness, partially shrouded in misty clouds. From space, it looked untouched, whole. There were no visible scars of war, no floating wreckage in orbit. It wasn't what Ethan expected. He had imagined ruins, a wasteland, a graveyard. But this, it was like the planet had been waiting. Xylera scanned the readings. Atmosphere is stable. Oxygen levels normal. Radiation, 0. She frowned. That doesn't make sense. Ethan nodded. If the planet was wiped out, there should be evidence. Scars. Something. Xylera hesitated. Unless it wasn't destroyed. Ethan turned to her. Then why erase it? Xylera's fingers hovered over the control panel. Then she whispered, because maybe they didn't want anyone to know what's still down there. Landing on the forgotten homeworld, the ship descended through thick cloud cover, breaking through into clear skies. Below them stretched vast landscapes, endless forests, massive mountains, shimmering blue oceans. Ethan stared in awe. It was beautiful. And then they saw the ruins. Towering metal structures half buried beneath vines and soil. Entire cities swallowed by nature. But they weren't abandoned. Lights flickered deep within the ruins. Shadows moved. Xylura's grip on the controls tightened. We are not alone. The sensors beeped. Emotion alert. Something was watching them. Then, a transmission crackled through the speakers. A voice. Deep. Human. Identify yourselves. Ethan's breath hitched. Xylura's eyes widened. That's. The voice repeated, this time more urgent. This is Earth's Sovereign Command. You have entered restricted airspace. If you do not respond, you will be engaged. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. This is Ethan Carter. I am human. A long pause. Then the response. Impossible. The last soldiers of humanity. Suddenly, the sky erupted with movement. Metallic shapes burst from the ruins. Aircraft. Massive war machines, sleek and advanced, rising from the forgotten cities. Ethan's pulse quickened. Human ships. But these weren't relics of the past. They were built for war. The radio crackled again. If you are human, prove it. Ethan glanced at Xylura. Then he exhaled. Let us land. We have a lot to talk about. The voice on the other end hesitated. Then finally, the response came. Welcome home. The last hope of humanity. The ship hovered in the sky, caught between two impossible realities. The Earth that history had erased, and the humans who were never supposed to exist. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears as he stared at the massive war machines surrounding them. These were not relics of the past. These were new, advanced human warships, built with sleek metal and glowing blue thrusters. Humanity wasn't extinct. It had survived. And now, they were watching him. A dangerous descent. The voice on the radio repeated, firmer this time. Identify yourself. Prove you are human. Ethan knew there was only one way. He leaned forward, voice steady. I don't know what proof you need, but I was born in the outer colonies. I grew up believing Earth was a myth. Until today. If you want more than that, you're going to have to let me land. Silence. The warships outside adjusted formation, flying in a Y-arc around them. Their weapons were armed, primed, ready. If they made the wrong move, they would be blown apart in seconds. Then the radio crackled again. Follow the escorts. No sudden movements. Ethan exhaled sharply. That's a good sign, right? Xylura, still gripping the ship's controls, didn't look convinced. Or, she said dryly, they want to bring us in so they can kill us up close. Ethan sighed. You always this optimistic. Xylura didn't answer. She simply adjusted the controls and followed the lid ship as it dipped below the clouds. Earth unfolded beneath them. The landscape was breathtaking. Vast forests stretched to the horizon, broken only by the skeletal remains of ancient cities. Rivers and lakes shimmered under the golden sunlight. But Ethan wasn't looking at the scenery. He was looking at the fortress ahead, the bastion of humanity. A colossal metal structure rose from the ruins, built into the side of a mountain. It was unlike anything Ethan had seen before, half buried, half alive. Massive towers jutted from the earth, covered in thick layers of reinforced plating. The old world was dead. This was something new. As they approached, the landing strip lit up, guiding them in. Ethan's hands curled into fists as the ship touched down, the engines hissing with steam. This was it. First contact. The moment the ship powered down, the exterior doors locked. Ethan's stomach twisted. Not a great start. Xylura tensed. They don't trust us. Outside, dark figures approached, human soldiers, armed to the teeth. Their armor was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, sleek, advanced, reinforced with exoskeletal plating. Their helmets bore a single red visor, glowing ominously in the dim light. They weren't just here to greet them. They were here to make sure they didn't leave. The main doors of the fortress opened, and a tall figure stepped forward. His armor was bulkier than the others, decorated with insignias Ethan didn't recognize. A leader. The radio crackled one last time. Exit the ship. Slowly. Ethan and Zylura exchanged a glance. Then, without another word, they stepped outside. A test of blood. The soldiers surrounded them instantly. Weapons raised. No hesitation. Ethan raised his hands, showing he wasn't a threat. So, is this how you welcome family? The leader took a step closer, his eyes scanning Ethan like a predator sizing up prey. His voice was cold, controlled. Humanity died 10,000 years ago. He narrowed his gaze. You should not exist. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I keep hearing that. The leader didn't react. Instead, he pulled out a small blade-like instrument, a medical scanner. Roll up your sleeve. Ethan hesitated. Do it, the soldier ordered. Ethan slowly complied, pushing up his sleeve to expose his forearm. The soldier stepped forward and pressed the scanner against Ethan's skin. The device hummed, analyzing his DNA. The moment it beeped, the leader froze. The soldiers around them shifted uneasily. Zylura tensed. What is it? The leader's voice was barely above a whisper. Impossible. Ethan frowned. Okay, seriously. What the hell is going on? The leader's red visor flickered, as if he was processing something. Then he spoke again. You are a perfect genetic match to the first generation. Ethan blinked. I'm... what? The leader took a step back, his expression unreadable. There has not been a first-generation human in over 10,000 years. Ethan stared at him. What did that mean? Then the soldier dropped to one knee. A king without a throne. One by one, the other soldiers followed suit, kneeling before him. Zylura stiffened, her eyes widening in disbelief. Ethan's mind struggled to keep up. What the hell is going on? He demanded. The leader finally spoke, his voice filled with something Ethan never expected. Reverence. You are not just a human. You are the last heir of the sovereign line. Ethan's breath caught. You are the rightful ruler of humanity. The words hit him like a shockwave. His stomach twisted. Zylura's sharp intake of breath told him she hadn't expected this either. Ethan took a step back. No, that's not possible. The leader slowly stood, his visor glowing under the dim lights of the fortress. We have waited for your return, my lord. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a leader. He was just a guy who wanted the truth. But now he was the last hope of an entire species. And the galaxy it had tried to erase humanity. It had no idea what was coming. The war begins. The air inside the fortress was heavy with silence. Hundreds of soldiers knelt before him, their red visors glowing like ghostly embers in the dimly lit hall. Ethan's mind refused to process what had just happened. Him. A ruler. No, it had to be a mistake. His hands curled into fists. This is insane. Zylura stood beside him, just as shaken. She was an alien among humans, yet even she could sense the weight of this moment. The leader of the soldiers, still kneeling, spoke again. We have waited for your return, my lord. Ethan's chest tightened. I am not your lord. The words were on his tongue, ready to escape, but something held him back. A part of him knew the truth. The Galactic Coalition had spent thousands of years erasing history. They had wiped Earth from the records. They had tried to erase his entire species. And yet, humanity had survived. Now they looked at him, not as an outsider, but as their last hope. He swallowed hard. Stand up. The soldiers obeyed instantly, rising as one. Ethan wasn't sure what scared him more, their discipline or their unwavering loyalty. Zylura finally found her voice. Ethan. She turned to him, eyes wide. What do we do now? He exhaled slowly. We get answers. The leader motioned toward the massive steel doors at the end of the hall. "Come with me, my lord. You must see what has been hidden from you." Ethan didn't move at first, but deep inside, something in him had already shifted. He wasn't just a lost diplomat anymore. He was walking into history. The truth of the last war. They moved deeper into the fortress, past enormous corridors lined with relics of the past, old war banners, ancient weapons, even faded recordings of battles fought long ago. Finally, they entered a vast underground chamber. The ceiling was high, arched with metal beams covered in dust. At the center of the room, a massive holographic display flickered to life, the final records of Earth's last war. The leader stepped forward, his voice firm. 10,000 years ago, humanity ruled the stars. Our fleets were unmatched. Our empire stretched across hundreds of systems. The Galactic Coalition feared us, so they conspired against us. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen glimpses of this in the stolen records from the station, but this was different. The hologram displayed a map of the galaxy. At its center, Earth. Around it, hundreds of red markers moving inward like a crushing tide. The leader continued. The coalition saw humanity as a threat, not because we were conquerors, but because we were free. We refused to submit to their rule. We refused to bow. Zelura whispered. So they wiped you out. The leader nodded. They launched a war of extinction. They burned our colonies. They silenced our leaders. They erased our existence from history. Ethan's fists clenched. The hologram zoomed in on a single battle, a final stand above Earth. Thousands of human warships stood against an entire armada of alien forces. For a moment, Ethan almost believed that the humans could win. Their ships were advanced, their pilots fearless. But then, a betrayal. The map flashed, marking key planets with a single symbol, an enemy within. Zelura gasped. Those are Rylari symbols. Ethan's head snapped toward her. Your people betrayed us. She swallowed. I didn't know. The leader nodded. The Rylari were among the first to turn against humanity. They infiltrated our ranks, sabotaged our defenses, and fed information to the coalition. Zelura's hands trembled. I was never told any of this. The leader's gaze didn't soften. Because your people have been living under lies for thousands of years. Ethan inhaled deeply. So how did Earth survive? The hologram zoomed in again. A secret evacuation, a last hope. We knew the war was lost, the leader admitted. So we took our strongest, our brightest, and sent them underground. We hid beneath the ruins of our own civilization. Ethan's heart pounded. For 10,000 years, the leader nodded. We have waited, building in secret, preparing for the day we would rise again. Then his visor flickered, locking onto Ethan. That day is now. The call to war. The heavy silence settled in the chamber. Ethan knew what was coming. These people, these soldiers, they wanted him to lead them. He exhaled. What do you expect me to do? The leader's voice was calm, yet filled with unshakable conviction. Take back what was stolen. Ethan shook his head. I don't even know who I am. I'm not some king. The leader stepped forward. You are the last of the sovereign line. That means you are our rightful ruler, whether you accept it or not. The galaxy already fears you. Ethan gritted his teeth. I don't want a throne. I want the truth. The leader studied him for a long moment. Then he motioned toward another holographic display. A massive warship appeared. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't like any human ship he had ever seen. It was huge, easily the size of a city. Its armor was black as night, its weapons so advanced they barely looked real. Zelura whispered, That's not possible. The leader smiled. It is. Ethan turned to him. What is that? The leader's visor glowed. It is the last of the supercarriers. It is the Hellfire. Ethan swallowed. And you expect me to command it? The The leader nodded. You are the only one who can. For a long time, Ethan just stared at the hologram. Then he slowly exhaled. He had been running his whole life, running from responsibility, from fate, from the truths buried in the stars. But now he had a choice. He could walk away, disappear, let the galaxy believe he was just another forgotten relic of a dead species. Or he could remind them who humanity truly was. His fingers curled into a fist, and when he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Tell me what I need to do. The return of the human empire. The leader nodded, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Prepare yourself, my lord. His voice was firm, unyielding. Because the war for the galaxy begins now. Epilogue. A message to the galaxy. Hours later, deep within the fortress, a transmission was sent out, the first human broadcast in 10,000 years. It reached every major world, every colony, every station under coalition control. And when it played, the galaxy trembled. A single message, a face appearing on the screen, a human, a king, Ethan Carter. And his words sent shockwaves through the stars. You tried to erase us. You tried to bury us. But humanity was never dead. We are coming back. And this time, we will not be merciful.